63 BC, a year that would change the course of history forever, though none of the peasants roaming Rome's dusty streets could have guessed it. A boy was born, not in some palatial villa amidst marble statues and silken cushions, but in the modest quarters of a noble yet unremarkable family. Gaius Octavius Thurinus, they called me, with little inkling that this name would be whispered or rather shouted by those who dared defy the gods themselves. My mother, Attia, niece of Julius Caesar, was the kind of woman you didn't dare disobey. She was Rome personified, strong, unyielding, and with just the right amount of ruthlessness. She never missed an opportunity to remind me that our family was destined for greatness, though I doubt even she envisioned what was to come. My father, a man of modest ambitions, passed away when I was but 4 years old. How convenient, really, no fatherly shadow to dim my inevitable rise. As for my education, well, let's say it was typical of a Roman boy with good connections. I learned to read, write, and speak eloquently, of course. But more importantly, I learned the art of survival, how to navigate the treacherous waters of Roman politics, where a misstep could lead to a dagger in the back or a poisoned goblet. Caesar took me under his wing, my dear uncle, and I quickly became his favorite. Not because I was the most charming or the bravest, but because I knew when to keep my mouth shut and my eyes wide open. But let's not get ahead of ourselves. Those early years were just the prelude, the overture to a symphony of power, betrayal, and yes, a little bloodshed. After all, what's a Roman tale without a few spilled guts? I could tell you that I always knew I was destined for greatness, but that would be a lie, one of the many I've learned to tell with a straight face. No, my rise was as much about timing as it was about talent. I learned early that to succeed in Rome, you needed to be more than just good, you needed to be lucky. And, as history would show, I was luckier than most. Stay tuned, for the real story begins when a certain Julius Caesar meets his untimely end, and I, the seemingly unremarkable Octavius, step into the spotlight. What could possibly go wrong? Now, if I'd known that Uncle Julius's death would turn Rome into a blood-soaked chessboard, I might have reconsidered my ambition. But there he was, sprawled out on the Senate floor, stabbed 23 times by men who once swore their undying loyalty. The Ides of March, they called it, a day that made sure no one in Rome ever felt safe again. And with Caesar gone, I was thrust into a role I wasn't quite ready for, but you know what they say about necessity and invention. I was just 18, practically a child, and yet, there it was, my inheritance, dripping with blood. I had a choice. Step up and claim it, or let it slip away into the hands of more experienced, more ruthless men. Let's be honest, Rome didn't need another naive youth, it needed a wolf in sheep's clothing. So I played the part, and how well I played it. But Rome wasn't going to hand itself over without a fight. First, I had to deal with Mark Antony. Antony, ambitious, brash, and as unwieldy as Cleopatra. He thought himself Caesar's rightful heir, but Uncle Julius had named me, Octavius, in his will. Antony sneered, the Senate scoffed, and the people watched. They didn't yet know what to make of me, the young pup nipping at the heels of Rome's seasoned wolves. Enter the second triumvirate. Antony, Lepidus, and me, a triumvirate of necessity, not affection. Our goal? To avenge Caesar and seize control of Rome. We divvied up the Republic like children squabbling over toys, and with our combined forces, we turned on Caesar's assassins. Brutus and Cassius, those idealistic fools, met their end at Philippi, and with their deaths, the last remnants of the Republic's old guard were swept away. But alliances are fickle, especially in Rome. Antony and I were bound to clash, it was only a matter of time. While he toyed with Cleopatra in the east, I consolidated power in Rome, portraying myself as the Republic's savior while quietly strangling it in its sleep. Yet beneath the veneer of the honorable young statesman, a storm brewed. I was not merely content with sharing power, I wanted it all. The cracks in our triumvirate deepened, and Rome buzzed with rumors. Would Octavius turn on Antony? Would Antony return from Egypt with Cleopatra at his side, ready to wrest control from the boy who dared to challenge him? You see, the Republic was no longer the land of Cincinnatus, of virtuous senators and noble ideals. It was a battleground, where only the cunning survived. And so, I sharpened my blade, biding my time, knowing full well that Rome was too small for both Antony and me. The end was near, but how and when would I make my move? Let's just say, when the time came, I made sure the history books would remember me not as Octavius, but as Augustus, the man who reshaped Rome and led it into a new era, for better or worse. And as for Antony? Well, the man had a weakness for queens, and that would be his undoing. But that tale, my friends, is for the next chapter. And so, there I stood, at the dawn of a new era, my era. The Senate, with their trembling hands and cautious eyes, granted me the title Augustus in 27 BC, a name that dripped with divine favor and authority. I could feel the weight of it settling on my shoulders. No longer was I the young Octavius, scrambling to avenge my uncle's murder. Now, I was Augustus, the first among equals at least. That's the story we told the people. The Republic was still there, on paper at least, but in reality it was a shadow of its former self. The Senate still met, the magistrates still wore their togas, but let's not kid ourselves, everyone knew who held the real power. And yet, I was careful, oh so careful, to maintain the illusion. The Romans were a proud people, fiercely protective of their republican traditions, even as they grew more obsolete by the day. I presented myself as the restorer of the Republic, the man who had saved Rome from the brink of chaos. But behind the scenes, I was slowly and meticulously weaving a new order. Power was consolidated in my hands, but with a gentleness that masked the iron grip I held over the city. I knew better than to parade myself as a king. Julius had made that mistake, and look where it got him. No, I was a humble servant of the Senate, the protector of the people's interests. At least, that's what they believed. Rome itself began to change under my rule. I embarked on grand building projects, transforming the city from a crumbling republic into a gleaming imperial capital. I found Rome a city of bricks, I later boasted, and left it a city of marble. The people cheered, the poets sang my praises, and the Senate awarded me more honors than I could count. The Pax Romana, the peace of Rome, was in full swing, and who could argue with that? After all, a little less freedom seemed a fair trade for the safety and prosperity I brought, or so they were convinced. But behind the facade of peace, the real Rome simmered. The plebeians were still poor, the patricians still greedy, and the streets still dangerous at night. The Republic had died, but the problems that plagued it had not. Yet, I knew that in the minds of the people, I was Augustus, the bringer of peace, the stabilizer of a chaotic world. It was a delicate balance, one that required constant vigilance and an understanding that my power was only as secure as the people's belief in it. And then there was Antony, the man who could have been a rival but instead became a warning. His affair with Cleopatra, his ambition, his arrogance, it all led to his downfall. When we finally faced off at Actium, it wasn't just a battle between two men, it was a battle for the soul of Rome. And when he fell, along with Cleopatra, the path was clear for me to reshape Rome in my image. So, here we were, a new Rome, a new order, and me at the helm. The Republic was dead, but few mourned its passing. They were too busy enjoying the peace, the stability, and the grand shows I lavished upon them. Bread and circuses, they say, and how true it was. I gave them what they wanted, and in return, they gave me their loyalty, or at least their obedience. But was this new Rome better than the old one? Had I truly saved it, or merely traded one set of problems for another? That's a question for the philosophers and historians, I suppose. For now, I was content to be the master of Rome, the first citizen in a city that would never be the same. Still, I couldn't help but wonder. Was Rome truly at peace, or was it merely the calm before another storm? And if that storm came, would the empire I built withstand it? But that, my friends, is a tale for another time. For now, let us bask in the glory of Rome, marble and all, and wait to see what the fates have in store. The end. Every great story has one, and mine was no exception. It was AD 14, and I knew the end was near. Not just for me, but for an era that I had shaped with my own hands. A curious thing, death. You can conquer armies, seduce nations, and bend the world to your will, but in the end, all you're left with is a frail body, and the whispers of a legacy you can no longer control. I had ruled Rome for over 4 decades, longer than most had dared to dream of. The once young Octavius, who had stepped onto the stage of history as a boy avenging his uncle, was now a tired old man, surrounded by marble statues of gods and heroes who had long since gone to their rest. My body was failing, but my mind was still as sharp as the dagger that had taken Julius from me. I knew what they were saying. Augustus, the immortal, was finally mortal. But they were wrong about one thing: I had never deluded myself into thinking I was a god. I merely made sure others believed it. On my deathbed, in the cool halls of Nola, I had time to reflect on all that had passed. The Senate, the Triumvirate, Antony, Cleopatra, the Republic. I had outlasted them all. I had reformed Rome, turned it from a crumbling republic into an empire that spanned the known world. But was it enough? Had I done right by the gods, by Rome, by myself? I left that question unanswered. What good was regret now? As I lay there, weak but still very much Augustus, I couldn't help but chuckle at the thought of what would come next. Would my empire hold together, or would it crumble like so many before it? Tiberius, my chosen successor, was a capable man, but he was no Augustus. Then again, who was? The Senate would no doubt heap praise on me, build temples in my honor, and declare me a god, but beneath their words would be the ever-present whispers of ambition and jealousy. I knew Rome, I knew its people. They would pretend to mourn, but secretly, some would be glad to see me go. And so, with my final breath, I uttered the words that would be remembered. Have I played the part well? Then applaud as I exit. A fitting end, don't you think? A nod to the theatre of life, where we all wear masks and play roles that aren't truly ours. The actor who had mastered the stage of Rome was leaving, and the curtain was about to fall. But what would they say of me, these Romans I had ruled and led? Would they remember me as a tyrant who killed the Republic, or as a savior who brought peace to a war-torn land? Would they see my reign as the beginning of a golden age, or the start of a slow decline into decadence and ruin? Only time would tell, and I wouldn't be around to hear the verdict. So, there it was, the end of Augustus, the man who had everything and yet, in the end, was reduced to nothing more than a name in the annals of history. But what a name it was! I had built Rome anew, crafted an empire, and left a mark that would be felt for centuries to come. My life had been a game of power, one I had played well. But now, it was time for the next act, and I, Augustus, would no longer be the one holding the reins. Yet, as my eyes closed for the final time, I wondered. Had I truly conquered Rome, or had Rome in the end conquered me? And in the silence that followed, I could almost hear the applause of a distant crowd, echoing through the corridors of time. When the curtain falls on a life as grand as mine, the echoes linger. And oh, what echoes I left behind! You see, it's not just about living, it's about leaving something behind, something that will outlast the marble statues and the inscriptions. I knew the moment I took power that I wasn't just shaping my present. I was chiseling away at history, making sure that when the scrolls were written, my name would be inked in bold. Rome had changed, and so had its people. The Republic, that old stubborn relic of a bygone age, was no more, replaced by something new, something enduring. I didn't just kill the Republic. I replaced it with something stronger, more resilient. The empire I forged was built to last, or at least, that was the idea. But history, I knew, has a way of unraveling even the best laid plans. My legacy would be tested by time and by the men who came after me. Tiberius, my chosen successor, was the first test. A capable ruler, yes, but he lacked the charm, the finesse, the understanding that Rome needed more than just a ruler. It needed a symbol. Tiberius was no symbol, he was a man, flawed and human. But then again, so was I. Perhaps that was my greatest trick, convincing Rome that I was something more than just a man. I was Augustus, the bringer of peace, the restorer of Rome, the first emperor in all but name. And so, when Tiberius took the throne, he inherited not just my title, but the impossible task of living up to the legend I had become. But let's be clear, my legacy wasn't just about power. It was about peace, stability, and the Pax Romana, the Roman peace, that spread across the known world like a soothing balm on a wounded body. For decades, Rome had been torn apart by civil war, strife, and bloodshed. I brought an end to that, not through lofty ideals or speeches, but through power, through control. Rome needed a firm hand, and I provided it. Of course, the historians would debate this. Was the peace worth the loss of freedom? Was the empire I built worth the cost to the republican ideals? But let's be honest, those ideals were already dying when I came onto the scene. I simply put them out of their misery and offered something new in their place. Was it perfect? Of course not. But perfection was never the goal, survival was. And survive it did. My empire, my Rome, lasted for centuries after I had turned to dust. The roads I built, the laws I passed, the cities I founded, they endured, carrying my name into the farthest reaches of time. Augustus, the first emperor, the man who made Rome into an empire that would stretch its influence across the globe. I made sure of that. Yet, as I lay on my deathbed, there was a lingering thought, a shadow that crossed my mind. Was it all worth it? The battles, the betrayals, the compromises, did they build a better Rome, or did they simply trade one set of problems for another? That's the question I leave for you, dear viewer. My legacy is not just the Rome I built, but the questions it raises, the balance of power and freedom, peace and tyranny, legacy and mortality. And so, as you walk through the streets of Rome, or gaze upon the ruins of what once was, remember this. I was Augustus, the man who reshaped Rome and left a mark that time has not yet erased. But in the end, my legacy is not just the buildings and roads, the laws and conquests. It's the stories, the legends, the echoes that whisper my name through the corridors of history. But was it enough? That, my friends, is a tale still being written. And now, the question you've all been waiting for, the one that haunts the minds of historians and lingers in the hearts of those who study the rise and fall of great powers. Was it worth it? Did I, Augustus, do the right thing by allowing the Roman Republic to end? It's a question I've asked myself countless times, though you may find it hard to believe. After all, I was the architect of Rome's transformation, the man who held the power to preserve or destroy the Republic. And destroy it I did, in a manner of speaking, though I never quite saw it that way. You see, the Republic was already teetering on the edge when I arrived on the scene. The Senate was a shadow of its former self, the people were disillusioned, and the armies were loyal to their generals, not to Rome itself. Julius, my uncle, saw this clearly. He understood that the old ways could no longer sustain the weight of an expanding empire. But he made the fatal mistake of wearing his ambitions too openly. Rome was not ready for a king, even if they desperately needed one. I learned from his errors. I played the long game, presenting myself as the humble servant of the Senate and the people, while slowly and steadily accumulating power. Was it deception? Perhaps. But I believed it was necessary. The Republic, in its original form, could not govern the vast territories we had conquered, nor could it protect the people from the chaos that threatened to engulf them. Rome needed a leader, not a committee of squabbling senators, and I was prepared to be that leader. So, I took the reins of power, not for my own glory, though I admit, the titles and honors were quite satisfying, but for the survival of Rome itself. And survive it did, for centuries after my death. The empire I forged became a beacon of civilization, a model for future generations. Law, order, peace. These were the fruits of my labor. And yet, in achieving this, something was lost. The Republic, with its ideals of liberty, equality, and shared power, was sacrificed on the altar of stability. Was it worth the cost? That depends on how you measure value. If you look at the peace and prosperity that followed my reign, you might say yes. But if you value the principles of freedom and democracy, you might say no. I, Augustus, am the product of these contradictions, a man who valued both power and the ideals of the Republic, yet who chose one over the other when forced to decide. In hindsight, I understand the importance of equality, freedom, liberty, and democracy. These are not just lofty ideals, but the foundation of a just and equitable society. But I also knew the harsh realities of the world I lived in, where ideals alone were not enough to maintain order. So, I did what I thought was necessary, and I have no regrets. But I leave it to you, posterity, to judge my actions. As you ponder these questions, perhaps you'll find that the story of Augustus is not just a tale of the past, but a reflection of the choices we all must make in our lives. Do we cling to the ideals of the past, even when they no longer serve us, or do we embrace change, even when it comes at a cost? That is the legacy I leave behind, a legacy not just of marble and law, but of questions that still resonate today. If you wish to walk in my footsteps, to see the world as I did, then journey to the ancient sites that bear my name, collect the coins that once passed through the hands of my subjects, and let history speak to you. Let it remind you that the Renaissance spirit, as it's now called, is more than just a philosophy or style. It's a way of living, learning, growing, and thinking. It's about embracing truth, knowledge, and compassion for humanity and our shared history. It's about being better stewards of the earth and each other. So, as I conclude this tale, I ask you to reflect on the choices we all must make. Live the Renaissance spirit. Not just as an observer of history, but as an active participant in the story of humanity. And if you find value in what I've shared, then spread the word. Share this story, learn from it, and perhaps, in doing so, you will find that you too have a role to play in the grand drama of history. Thank you for walking this path with me. The stage is yours now. Will you play your part well? The applause awaits. Our channel, known as the Renaissance Spirit, is dedicated to the pursuits of a just, equitable, and humanitarian world, and how and why we all need to be the solution to the issues facing us today. Video topics encompass areas including news, analysis, history, politics, religion, personal development, society, culture, social and environmental justice, and other topics of liberal arts and sciences, including ancient Rome and the Roman Empire, which is a great comparison and contrast of the modern world. Topics perfect for the true modern and egalitarian polymath. A person with an open mind and the thirst for truth in its many forms and disciplines, a journey through knowledge, reason, and time. The Renaissance ushered in a golden age and the pursuit of knowledge both lost to time and yet to be discovered. It gave birth to the Enlightenment and the Age of Reason and the Age of Humanism. Embracing truth, knowledge, and an understanding and compassion for humanity and our shared history opens up the world to each of us individually and collectively, enhancing our stewardship of the earth and our relationships with one another. Living the Renaissance spirit means engaging with history, not as a distant past, but as a living dialogue, constantly informing and enriching our present, and the Renaissance spirit is a reminder of our dialogue with the future, our progeny and posterity, our legacy. Will we grant them a future free from fear of climate change and tales of the end of democracy? Will they admonish us for our sins and omissions, or will they remember us fondly as saviors of humanity and the natural world? Please take the quiz next to see if you're a Renaissance spirit. Please subscribe, turn on notifications, and share. If you're looking to explore and experience life in the steps of the true masters of the Renaissance and free thinkers throughout our past, present, and future. So, dear traveler through time, let us continue this journey together, finding inspiration in the stories of those who came before us and those who come next, and forging a future guided by equality, wisdom, and compassion. Vive Renaissance Spiritus. Historia non est mortua, sed intellectus noster.